Everyone see my slides?
Yes, we can see.
Yes.
Awesome. So that's working. It's always good when it works, doesn't it? Right. Hello, everyone. I think it's good morning to you. It's good evening. It's like almost good night to me. I'm currently in India. So it's amazing to have the technology to be able to speak across the globe. So thank you. Welcome to my talk today. I'm going to be talking about introduction to research. So let's get the party started. I should also say, maybe as a warning,
Sorry,
I'm
Philip.
usually...
Can
Yes?
you put full screen mode, please? We
No, I'm
show
afraid...
announce.
Yeah, I'm afraid that that's the best that I can do at the moment. So you will have to live with the fact that there is a screen when I'm sharing it like this. So
Okay.
full screen, because otherwise I won't be able to see my notes. So anyway, I hope that's not going to be a biggie. My talks, I like to keep them interactive. So I will be asking you also questions and hopefully you'll be able to contribute in the chat. So who am I? I'm a little bit of a mixed bag because I'm a mix between an educator, a researcher, and an entrepreneur. So let me just start, the usual statement. So what is it that I'm actually doing? So I'm the founder, CEO, and lead educator of ThinkingBeyond Education. And I'm speaking today on behalf of ThinkingBeyond Education to you. I'm also the co-founder of UpskillAI, which is a startup that I've just started quite recently, together with some postgraduate friends from the UK. We'll be focusing on upskilling and reskilling the workforce in AI. I am a mathematician and a physicist. My PhD is in mathematics from the University of Cambridge. I also, at the moment, happen to be the external expert advisor for Google DeepMind. This is also why I'm currently in India, because it's about AI for education. As a research mathematician, of course, I've been doing research at the University of Cambridge, but also at Lund University at the Center of Mathematical Sciences. Now, besides that, I have over 8 years of teaching experience, qualified teacher stages, and a postgraduate certificate in education. Now, when you read all of this, it sounds fantastic. But I always like to say, look, having the accolades, like having the achievements, of course, this comes with time if you work hard and if you put effort into it. But I think what is a little bit more interesting than that is my journey. Again, I think because it's unusual. So let me share a little bit about my journey. Which hopefully helps you to understand like how does all of this come together, me as a educator and a researcher. So when was it that I first taught? It was actually my own physics class in year 13 because our physics teacher has been ill and I've been teaching quantum mechanics to my fellow students. So that was my first teaching experience. It was also around that time that I really got interested into research because when I was in high school, I was doing like lots of little research projects that really got me excited into research. And I will be talking about that later. But, if you want to get into research, like doing little research projects is something that I would really, really recommend you do as well. So that got me excited into research. It also taught me some initial research skills. And then I moved on to university. I studied physics first because, in fact, even though I'm a research mathematician, I tend to hate math until I was 17, roughly right there. It's only then that I start opening up to mathematics. So you see, interests change. I started studying with the focus on becoming a theoretical physicist. So I've been very much interested into quantum mechanics. So I've been doing quite a bit of work on the foundations of quantum mechanics. But eventually I realized that I'm getting more and more interested in the mathematics behind things. And so I gradually shifted and became a mathematician. So I then didn't complete the physics degree. I then switched over to mathematics and completed my mathematics degree, for which then I went on to do a PhD. So while I was doing all of this, I was still teaching. I really love teaching at university. I've been teaching the undergraduates. I've been giving supplemental courses and programs to explain and to help them to understand what they're covering in the lectures. Then I moved on to Cambridge, which is where I finally kind of started my kind of like proper research, you could say, and that is in the field of synthetic differential geometry. I presume no one of you has heard about what that is, and for the sake of this talk, you also don't need to worry about that. I'll just give you one idea what it is about. It is doing rigorous mathematics, rigorous differential geometry, but not based on analysis and calculus, but on infinitesimals. Okay, so that is what synthetic differential geometry is about. I've been teaching that in Cambridge as well, so I've been giving seminars about that, etc., etc. Now, when I was doing my PhD, I was always very idealistic about my research. So I went to do the research in synthetic differential geometry, but this is a very, very niche field, right? Very niche. That means not many people are doing it. And therefore, career-wise, that was not the wisest choice because it was very, very hard for me then to kind of do a postdoc. In fact, it was not possible because all the professors who are working on this, they were already retired. Right? So there was no one kind of no research group that is doing active research on synthetic differential geometry. This is why I also could not go and do research in it on continuing research career. That got to me quite late because again, I was always an idealist. I was not really planning and strategizing like how to do research. So if you kind of want to go into research, if you want to do an academic career, then it's important that you kind of consider both aspects. What is it that really interests you? Right? Let's say here we're doing quantum computing. So what is it about quantum computing that's, say, interests you? And then, of course, you have to see, is that a topic that is still being pursued so that you get academic positions, be able to do that. So both sides have to be considered. Now, because I couldn't move on to do research at university, I was thinking, oh, what else should I do? And then it crossed me, hey, I mean, you always love teaching, so let's try, can you get a teaching position? And the easiest thing to do was, of course, to go to high school teaching because there are not many high school teachers teaching mathematics and physics. So I thought, okay, let's try this out. So in the last year of my PhD, I was also active in schools in Cambridge. I was doing outreach work, working with gifted and talented students in mathematics, and I really enjoyed that. So I thought, hey, give it a go. So afterwards, I went into education. So I was teaching physics and mathematics at a private secondary school, and this is where my teaching experience comes in. Now, being a PhD, of course, and a researcher, I was not very fond of like what I was teaching. I found that a bit boring. So I immediately started to build, a physics and math circle where we've been going and doing topics beyond the school syllabus, and that was called Physics Beyond. Fast forward, Physics Beyond turned into Thinking Beyond Education, and this is what I'm here for today. Now, I've been teaching 8 years. At some point, I've then been fed up with it. I used the chance to go back to university to do a postdoc to, move on with my research projects that I've been pursuing parallel to my teaching. So this is how I got into Sweden. This is where I did my postdoc at the Center of Mathematical Sciences at Lund University. And I was able to advance my research, which made me very, very happy that I could finally do and push forward my research. Meanwhile, I've also been building what is now Thinking Beyond. So what is Thinking Beyond? Thinking Beyond is an organization for gifted and talented students in the wider sense. So it's high school students, but also university students. And the programs that we're running, they're focused on university students. I will be talking about them at the end. So I've been building this organization while I was teaching, then later when I was doing research at university. And then, of course, because, being then an educator, but also having a PhD, opportunities open up by talking to my friends. So networking, of course, very important. I got to know that Google DeepMind is working on an AI tutor. I really love this project. And again, through my connections, through my network, I was able to get into this project. And now I've been working for them for over a year as an external contractor. Okay. And that's, for example, what brings me currently to India. All right. So life is full of surprises. You don't need to think that you need to follow a linear way in your career. What is important, though, is that you build your expertise and that you build your skills and that you build your network. These are the three important ingredients, right? And that you keep growing and developing, and that you also have an eye out what interests you, but also what is required. What is in need? What is it that other people are interested in where you could contribute? So I guess these are the three messages that I would want to share when you kind of now been following me and my journey. Of course, now cut a little bit short, right? I, of course, want to move on and talk about what it means to do research. But throughout this time, throughout my journey, I've been doing research and I keep doing research. Of course, there is a price to pay if you do so many things as I do right now, and that is that you, of course, have much less time. So my research output is, of course, very, very slow, right? Very, very slow. There's lots of work to do, and I need to create time for this to happen. But this is also okay, right? At the moment, I'm an entrepreneur. So at the moment, I'm focusing on building Thinking Beyond Education and also Upskill AI, right? And that means, of course, that there is less time to do research because I have also all my teaching commitments. But it's also very exciting. So I'm not regretting it. I'm just hoping, and this is what, for example, for my plans in the future, to block more time for doing research. Okay, so let's move on and let's start thinking about what, what is research? And the very first question that I would like you to ask, and this is now your time to kind of join and actively into the chat, is to think about what is actually the difference between a researcher and a student. What do you think are the main differences? And now bear in mind when you answer that there are, of course, also student researchers, right? So that exists as well, right? Research is also something that can be done at undergraduate level. It can be done at any level. So therefore, it's more about the fundamental differences. So let's please type into the chat what you think, right? What you think is the difference between a researcher and a student. Let's hear your opinions. I mean, I don't know how many we are. If we're not that many, then you can also just say it, right? So I'm seeing difference as experience, perspective, not only knowledge. I hope that is for my question. But as I said, you can be a student researcher. Then you also don't have much experience and also not so much knowledge. So Adriana says a researcher creates new knowledge. That is true. I think that is certainly a fundamental difference. Then Daiminis writes, the one you're passionate about a course or skill that we have interested in research means he has a goal he was doing and performing research till they succeed. So there seems to be a difference in motivation and drivenness. Adriana writes, and students only learn about the knowledge. Aitov writes, research is a student without teacher. Well, hopefully, if you start doing research, you have a research mentor. That would be a bit lonely if it's just you. Okay, thank you very much for sharing. So we have here some inputs. I really like this idea of different motivation, right? So as a student, I'm mostly focused on, oh, I need to learn. And my motivation, sadly, is usually, oh, I need to learn it for the next exam. The researcher, however, they really study a subject, to develop expert understanding, a deep understanding. They want to penetrate deeper, right? So that is the difference. Now, if you want to penetrate deeper, right? If you want to penetrate deeper, that also means it takes more time. Yeah. So if you take a researcher's point of view, and I would invite all of you to actually do that from time to time in the topics that you're really, really interested in, then you should not just attend lectures, you should also be reading and studying books, right? You should be reading and studying books. You should, gather in groups, form reading groups, and then go and study the subject in depth. Ask the nasty questions like why? And how? Why is this so? How is this linked? Like, ask all of these questions where you try to link your knowledge, not just, oh, do I roughly understand how this calculation works, right? For example, do I roughly understand the Schrödinger equation? Or am I asking, well, where does the Schrödinger equation come from? Why is it true? Or is it true? When is it not true? Right? When is a quantum system not following the Schrödinger evolution? Right? So these would be the kind of questions that you would be asking as a researcher, whereas as a student you would be, okay, this is the Schrödinger equation. How do I solve it? Maybe, how do I build simple models? This would be a kind of student approach. So the researcher goes deeper. And if you take the researcher's point of view as a student, you try to penetrate the subject into more depth. But once again, there is a price to pay because it takes time, right? It takes time, more time. So this means if you have many, many courses, say during the term, and then many, many exams, which sadly universities at the moment all kind of tick this way, okay, then you have to be careful because you also need to make sure that you, of course, cover everything to a degree where you can get good grades in your exams because that influences your future career prospects, applications for scholarships, etc., etc. So this is where you have to be careful as students. When am I going to activate this researcher's point of view? When I'm going to really penetrate deeper? And where will I just need to accept for the moment that I can do things more superficially? Okay, so just be aware about that. Yeah. Okay. So now let's have a look and discuss what actually makes a good researcher, right? What makes a good researcher? So I've listed a bunch of things that I want to just go through. I think the very first point, inquisitiveness, that is probably well understood, right? If you are not inquisitive, if you're not curious, and you've been writing this, right? If you're not curious, then probably research is not the right thing for you. You really need to be curious about the world, about the topic that you want to research. Otherwise, yeah, you're not going to enjoy it, right? The other thing, and that has been mentioned by you as well, is the subject knowledge, right? And here we need to be a little bit careful in distinguishing, right? So on one hand, as a researcher, you should have a mastery of the basics and the kind of expected standard knowledge. But of course, if you want to do research, as I've been saying, you need to go beyond, right? You need to go into more depth, right? So you have to have a mastery of the basics, but also for the selected fields that you're interested in, you need to go beyond into more depth. Now, the next point that we have is the mastery of technical skills, right? So what are these technical skills? Maybe again, let's hear from you. What do you think? What technical skills would you be listing that would make a good researcher? So again, type into the chat and I'm going to be reading it out. What technical skills should we master or need to master as researchers? Writing. Oh, beautiful. Sebastian, beautiful. Okay, I will have that later, that writing, not under technical skills, but writing is certainly something that having a good mastery of writing will be important, but we will be listing that under communication skills, right? Because communication skills, when we write, we communicate. Organization skills, this is also great, very, very important. That's something I would put under project management. So now we have programming and problem solving. Problem solving is not a technical skill. It's still kind of like an overarching skill, but could be, listed here under skills in general, right? We need to be good at problem solving. Programming, certainly, right? We need to have mastery over certain IT tools, and programming is one of them, right? Then it depends. Programming languages, which one would you take? As researchers, Python, even if you don't like it, Yeah, but more than Python, maybe start looking at also languages that are getting popular are Julia. So Julia is something that if you haven't had a look at it yet, I would recommend that you start having a look at it. I personally don't know much about it, but I'm picking it up from different communities that there is a kind of push towards Julia in various branches of research. There might be also kind of older systems like MATLAB. If you have learned MATLAB, then I would say, okay, if you have to do it for university, do it. But I would not waste too much time on MATLAB because that's just getting redundant, right? I mean, Python can do all of it more or less. MATLAB I would not spend too much time on. But you need to kind of, if you say programming, I think this is very important. And you need to, of course, decide what. Because if you want to go into research, you are not going to be some coding wizards. Okay, that's not the aim. You will only spend limited time with code, but you need to know how to do some programming. So we read further, reading again, critical thinking, love this, absolutely true, right? Reading is definitely something that we need to be able to do as well. That's maybe something that doesn't really fit into these categories that I've been putting in here, more to kind of like, learning skills, which I have not actively listed here. This is where we need to be able to do reading. We need to know how to read. Critical thinking, absolutely, right? This is again, problem solving, critical thinking, knowing how to read, great. Data analysis, yes, but that kind of depends where you want to go. If you want to do kind of more experimental subjects, or if you want to go into machine learning, of course, data science, then data analysis is very important. So if you're in an empirical science, then knowing some data analysis is important. But of course, you could also decide to go into theory, right? So this is something that you could do as well. So communication is listed, so we will be discussing that. Observation and analysis, also very important skills. Right, networking, yes, this is listed as well. Right here we're mentioning the programming tools, so you're listing Python, Qiskit, yeah. Depends where you want to go, absolutely agree, Adriana. Okay, so you have really, really good ideas. Now for technical skills specifically, what I would, for example, mention is theoretical and mathematical modeling, right? That's very, very important. Even if you do not want to stay in academia, this is a skill that is also what if you are doing like a theoretical subject, STEM subject, that's also what gets you your job later on, right? So the ability of producing mathematical models. Very, very powerful. So something that physicists particularly are very, very good at because they do it all the time, right? So theoretical and mathematical modeling. If you go into the experimental direction, then it is, of course, experimental techniques, right? If you say in quantum computing, oh, I really want to go to quantum hardware, well, then you need to know the experimental techniques, right? I'm not a good person to be asked about that because, again, I'm more of a theoretician, as I said. But of course, if you want to do that, then you better get some lab experience and build experimental techniques. We mentioned IT tools. So you can use specific software. Is very important. Program we mentioned. What has not been mentioned is LaTeX, for example, right? This is also an IT tool that is needed. Kamsi, please close the audience window. So I'm not quite sure what you mean by the audience window on my presenter screen. Let me have a look. Okay, don't know where this came from. Sorry. Now I see what you mean. Hang on. Now I lost my notes. Need to recover that. Okay, here I am. And then you need applications for productivity, project management, literature management, citations, etc. Right? So there are kind of multiple IT tools that you need to master. Now let's move on to project management skills next, and then I'll come to communication. For project management, what you need to master, and this is something that students, but also like us adults, sometimes are not very good with, is scheduling and time management, right? So project management, the very first thing you need to be good at is scheduling and time management. And then when we talk about project management skills, you should be familiar with some project management frameworks. So for example, I mean, if you already had some encounter with, software development, then you might have heard about the Agile framework, right? Which I think is, for example, very, very interesting also for research, right? So the Agile framework, the Agile project management framework, or there are multiple, but they can be beautifully adapted to research, very, very suitable. But also other project management tools, like for example, waterfall, where you plan the whole project, and break it down in each step and plan everything out before you start working on the project. Whereas agile, I mean, again, for not have the time to go into the details of it, but agile project management is more flexible, right? There you kind of adapt the goals where you need to go based on your insights, right? And that you gather. Like that would be for research. When you do it in software design, then it is more about adapting based on your customer's input. Okay. Communication skills, very, very important. I was very glad to see that that's something that you've been listing as very important. Usually, right, when we're here kind of in the STEM world, this is something that is not explicitly mentioned. But communication skills involves like giving presentations, right, like I'm giving right now, right? Delivering talks, right? When you go and you present your research, you deliver talks. If you're very good at it, that means you're good at communicating your research. That means more people will understand what you're doing and might get interested in your work, right? There is also other communication that is involved, and that is with stakeholders, right? You might need to communicate with your supervisor, right? Or with your principal investigator for whom you are working, where you are like part of the project, right? Other stakeholders might be, for example, the university management, right? Or when you apply for grants, right? You need to be good at writing grant applications because that is what finances, what pays your research, right? What gives you the money to be able to get students, to be able to, travel, and to be able, to get funding. So, maybe compute so that you can actually do your simulations, that you can run your projects. Another very important thing is teaching skills, right? Because again, when you're a researcher, you will need to be teaching about your research. You will need to be able to raise students yourself that will want to come and participate. Now, I presume that most of you are still students, so you might say, okay, teaching, maybe I have a bit of time. And that is true. But imagine, you're going to go and do a master's thesis at some point. Then it might be that you will need to teach a bachelor student who will be doing part of your project. So the teaching actually comes much earlier on than you might think. And another important thing is to do outreach, right? Learn to communicate like with the public, because usually it's the public that sponsors your research. And we have a responsibility towards the public to be able to communicate what we're doing. And of course, when we're talking to the public, then we cannot speak like to our peers, like to our colleagues or to our supervisors, right? So this requires a different form of communication. Now, leadership and teamwork, I think that is also more or less understood, right? When you're a researcher, you need to take the lead, right? You are managing yourself, you're managing a project, and you are also part of a team, right? So this also links to project management, that you can work in a team, because most of the research, almost all of the research, is always teamwork. So understanding how to work productively in a team, how to manage a team well, that is very important to be productive when doing research. Okay. And then networking, this is very, very important, as I've been saying in the beginning when I was sharing my story. Where do you do this? You go to conferences, right? This is where you can network, talk to people. You attend seminars, and also, maybe a little bit neglected, reading groups, right? Reading groups. That's something that you students should be organizing, that you have reading groups about different topics where you walk through different books. And this is where you also network, get to know each other. Okay, so it's not just networking with someone who is higher up in experience or higher up the career ladder. It's very important, excuse me, that you also network with each other. Okay, right. So, what I have forgot to list, so thanks for reminding me, this is this kind of learning how to learn, like knowing how to learn effectively. That's been forgotten on this slide. The thinking skills, the critical thinking, right? As a researcher, if I want to develop depth in understanding, then I can't simply take the information face value. I need to think critically. Now, critical thinking doesn't mean that I'm going to be questioning everything in a sense like that I'm not going to be trusting anything, but it is about understanding, that I'm saying, okay, how is this working, right? Maybe where are crunch points, consulting multiple sources, etc., etc. Okay. So now let's move on to this point that I have not explicitly listed, but of course I have it here. It's very, very important. And that is learning and studying as a researcher. We've already mentioned it, or you mentioned it. We need to learn how to read scientific texts. Yeah. And scientific texts are not read like, your famous drama, the drama book or whatever, or mangas or whatever you like, right? So this is a scientific text. It needs to be read differently, right? There may be different ways how to read the text. You will, first create like a first reading where you will develop a rough understanding, and then you will need to do reading of some parts in depth. You will need to develop some of the arguments yourself, right? This is especially true for mathematics, right? You might want to do the proofs yourself, all right? Not just kind of reading about them, but filling in the gaps. Then you will want to go and you want to do some cross-referencing. When you do reading at an academic level, you should always have multiple sources. That also applies when mentioning the reading groups again. You run a reading group and you say, okay, let's read this book, right? Let's read this book. And then you say, okay, we're going to be reading this book, but we also want to have some other books, even though we will be focusing on that one book that we decided to study in depth, we will be utilizing other books for cross-referencing. Very important is also to read papers. That's something that you need to start doing too, and be aware papers are different from books. Okay, this is a very different animal, and it also has to be read differently. In particular, like when we read papers, we need to be way more critical because they reflect usually new research, right? And even if it's an old paper, that's a well-established paper, then of course it's a paper. It's not been processed many, many times through many academics, and it hasn't been written down in book form yet. So maybe there are still information in that paper that I have to be careful about. On the other hand, reading in particular original papers, yeah, so even if they're from the 50s, 60s, 70s, right, and when you save quantum computing, then that goes way back, okay, you also want to look at the original literature. Why? Because it will give you inspirations, right? There is so much going on, right, that the author has been thinking when coming up with an idea. But usually what happens when you see it in a textbook, only the main idea is taken and explained. But there was lots of additional thoughts that the authors usually had that is being neglected. And when you go there and you read the original paper, you might discover something new, completely new insights, because the author at that time has been thinking very, very deeply about the topic, and it can enrich your understanding. So reading papers, even the old ones, is also very, very important when I'm learning and studying as a researcher. What should never be underestimated is to discuss with peers and senior researchers, right? You usually, your lecturers offer like office hours, use them. Go there and talk to them. Talk to them about your understanding. Have a chat with them. Really utilize their expertise to be able to improve your own. Okay. So now something that is sadly very neglected in education, both at university as well as in school, is actually effective study skills. Okay, because Studying is a skill, right? It's not just the ability to read and to understand, right? Studying is skills. Now, again, I do not have the time to really deep dive into this, right? But I'm just going to put it out there. Research effective study skills. What is effective? What is not effective? Because if you do, and if you build these skills, right, and maybe some of you already have, that I don't know, because again, I don't know you, but I really like to stress this point. Effective study skills, very, very important, because they allow you to learn faster, right? It's very simple. And as a researcher, you have to learn all the time. You have to process lots of information. So if you can study more effectively, right, that means you have a chance to, get an edge over someone else because you can study faster. Yeah. So effective study skills, very undervalued, but very, very important. And probably the most important thing for you right now is develop personal knowledge management techniques. Again, this is a huge topic by itself, right? Like I'm putting this out there. Personal knowledge management doesn't mean I'm just taking notes, okay? So there is so much more that goes into a good personal knowledge management so that the notes and the information that you record and you process serves you and can be utilized by you later. Yeah? Writing down lecture notes in a lecture is not going to help you. Believe me, I have tons of lecture notes from the lectures that I've been attending. They're somewhere in the attic. Yeah, they don't serve me anymore. It's bad. I would like them to serve me. Again, if I knew and if I were able to do better personal knowledge management when I was at university, then the situation would be very, very different. But I learned about it much, much later. Okay, so this is learning and studying as a researcher. What is, of course, important that these are just individual things that I've been mentioning, but as you see on the slide, everything is connected, right? So you need to kind of, make sure that you do all of these things to a certain degree, that you build skills in all of these degrees, because then you get a synergetic effect. It's not just, oh, I'm just going to be doing effective study skills, ignore everything else, right? Or, oh, I'm just going to be good at reading scientific texts, ignoring everything else. That's not working. Okay, you need to do everything. Right. So now let's have a look how to do research, right? How to actually go about it. Yeah. So do research. What would you do? The very and most important thing is, of course, asking questions, right? The inquisitiveness that we mentioned. You need to be able to ask questions, and you need to also learn to ask good questions, right? That's very important. Really try to spend time, if you do a research project, I've been mentioning this, as will come back in a minute, spend a considerable amount of time to think about your research question. Usually when you formulate your research question really, really well, it already contains a hint towards how you're going to answer it. So asking questions is absolutely imperative. The better question you ask, the smarter questions you ask, the easier or the more directly you're going to get to answers. So that is a very important skill. Now, what's the next one? Cross-linking knowledge across fields. Research is also creative. This is not just kind of like a systematic thing. It has, of course, systematic elements in it, right? It has techniques in it, but you will get to points where you simply have to have an insight. This is about creativity. Now, this creativity can be triggered and supported when you actively cross-link your knowledge across different domains, right? And here I don't just mean technical domains, right? Like say mathematics and physics. I really mean different domains. So maybe also literature, philosophy, art, music, right? So cross-linking, yeah, that's sometimes okay. Music and physics, okay, there are some links, but might not be that obvious, or art and physics. But cross-linking knowledge, exploring other fields, that can give you also lots of inspiration. Now, of course, you need to be constantly acquiring knowledge. This is the thing that I mentioned, building expertise. I think that doesn't require any further explanations. And here comes this inspiration and creativity, right? So find routines that get you creative. Maybe you just want to go for a walk. Procrastination, actually, we know from research now that procrastination is a driver for inspiration and creativity. So If you tend to procrastinate, of course, I'm not saying you procrastinate all the time, but a certain degree of procrastination is actually needed or is helpful to get our inspiration and creativity. So sometimes just sitting there, going for a walk and thinking, just thinking, or maybe just observing and waiting for that spark to come, that is also very, very important. Okay, so research, as I've been saying, is also creativity. Now, the best way to start research is actually to start your own mini investigations and testing of ideas. You're reading this book, you say, oh, this idea, actually, I want to understand in more detail how it works. Go and investigate. Or if you read a paper, right? And it is possible for you to reproduce it, like it's a theoretical paper, right? Then try to reproduce it, right? Try to say, okay, here the code, I want to reproduce it, or this calculation, I actually want to reproduce it, and then start asking questions. Start your mini investigation and keep testing your own ideas. Don't expect that you need to do like a big project right from the get-go. Start small. That's what I've been doing when I was in high school. Small little research projects. I've been reinventing the wheel. I didn't come up with anything new, but the experiences that I've gained, they were massively important for me later on. Okay. Then the other things is that you need to think about, okay, you might have many ideas, you might have these inspirations, but of course you also need to technically realize these ideas, right? So getting and developing the skill to say, okay, I also now need to put these ideas into reality, I need to make them happen, is very important, not just thinking about them. And last but not least, you need to be looking for collaborators. I've been saying research is done in a team is, if you manage the team well, way more productive for you than when you do that individually. So finding peers, right, and events like this are great so that you can network with your peers and that you go away and say, hey, maybe we can do this project together. Very, very important. Okay. So now here we have it, right? Everything is connected as before, right? Start from asking questions. This is how the research starts, right? Until technical realization of ideas and finding collaborators, right? So everything is once again connected. Okay. Now, part of academia and part of research is, of course, also publishing papers. I would say that this is not the very first thing that you should be thinking about, right? This is something that comes out of it. But of course, you can practice writing down your research. So you can write your own papers, should not necessarily need to think about publishing. Now, seeing the time, I don't want to push this too far. So I'm just going to simply mention a couple of things. I presume that some of you are already aware with quite a bit of what I'm going to say. So when you look at papers, the very first thing that you would be looking is at preprints, right? So papers that have not been peer reviewed. You find them on Archive, on ResearchGate, on Google Scholar, right? This is where you find preprints. Then learn about the peer review process, right? So that you understand how this worked. And if you then get to write, do research where the results actually become publishable, then of course you also need to learn about selecting the right journal, right, for your paper, that it reaches the right audience, right? There's also a thing called impact factor. There's kind of lots of such things in academia which are very worthwhile to be discussed. Cannot do it in this framework, but discuss this critically, please. But the impact factor is kind of like a measure to say, okay, this is kind of how much your research is going to be propagated, right? So how much people are going to read it and build on it. Okay. Now, let's have a look for the final thing about research career, right? So let's tackle 3 questions: how to get into research, what is academia, and then the difference between academia and industry. So how to get into research, right? I've already mentioned it. This mini research, investigate your ideas, do your own projects, develop your own ideas, try to reproduce published work, and then go and investigate it further. What you can do at university, go and attend research seminars, right? They can be by a research group. You can go and attend these, and you can also check out for your PhD. So PhD students usually have their own research seminars where they're sharing. So this is where you can get into it to learn about ideas, to get to know people, and to learn about current research to help you get started, right? This is be part of the community, is it in one word. So now, what is academia? All right, you have academia and industry. So academia, I guess you're familiar with it. This is when you stay at university, right? So you, after your master's, you go and do your PhD, and then you decide, okay, I want to do a postdoc, right? A couple of them, and then you're aiming to become an assistant professor and eventually a professor. Okay, so this is a route that you can choose to stay in academia because you want to do academic research. But also, there is a different option that you say, no, actually, I want to do research in industry. That's also a possibility, right? There are differences, of course. Research in industry is very much focused on producing, like on producing something that the company wants, right? Whereas academia gives you a little bit more freedom, right? Because there you can maybe investigate questions that do not have direct applications, you know, that's the freedom of academia, right? But again, in academia, you need to get your funding. In industry, that is usually taken care of, right? Because everyone focuses on the same project. Okay. So I've now given you, a very quick overview. I know I've been throwing it at you. Thank you very much for participating. That was great, kind of hearing your ideas. Usually, this is my style of teaching. The sessions are more interactive. Today, I've been talking more, again, also due to the time limitation. If you want to learn more about research and kind of practicing it, then I would recommend that you apply to our Beyond X programs. The one that is upcoming is Beyond Quantum, Introduction to Quantum and Research. Applications will open, I think, in 2 weeks' time, roughly. Okay. So thank you very much. Now let's head
Thank
over.
you, Phil, for
See you.
your insightful presentation. Here we have a couple of questions, so we may jump into it right now because we are running. Okay. Have you had any experiences or interactions with Latin American students or researchers that left a lasting impression on you?
Like very, very little, because again, due to my limited ability to speak Spanish, I mean, I'm currently living in Spain actually, so I'm learning. Not so much, no.
Okay, great. Uh,
But I've seen a
okay, so
question. What lessons from your international experience could help Mexico and Latin America modernize how we teach science and mathematics? I mean, in general, I can tell you one sad truth. Mathematics and science education sucks across the world, right? And this is also why I'm currently in India. I've been invited here to help the school to really improve their own education and the mathematics education in particular. I can tell you from my experience, having had students across the world, right, that this is bad everywhere. So I think my advice would probably be also the same as to everyone else, and that is that mathematics education and science education has to change in a way that it becomes less dogmatic, less focused on that we need to teach tons and tons and tons and tons of things superficially, but that we really need to focus on developing the skills, right? The skills that are the thinking skills, lateral thinking, how to develop expertise. Okay, so that would be my answer to that question.
thank you. Adriana, please come on by. Uh,
Yes, can you hear me now?
yeah,
Yes.
Great. So thank you very much for your presentation. It's for me an honor that I'm here because I follow Thinking Beyond Education for a little bit long time.
Oh,
But I
okay. Thank you.
saw, yes, so I'm very happy. I saw that you had these two programs, but I want to apply to the quantum one. But yes, I missed the deadline for March until June. I know this was one, right? And now you have this with AI. Did you recommend me to also enroll in this? And are you going to open again the quantum one because this is the one that I'm interested to
Yeah, as I said, like
participate?
The applications for Beyond Quantum are going to open like in 2 weeks' time,
Oh,
right?
great.
Then the deadline will be the end of December.
Okay.
Then the preparation stage will be through January, right? So if you know about it, what I would recommend, again, I don't know your level at this moment, so I would definitely recommend check out the Beyond Quantum resources page. Right? I mean, I have now, I'm quite happy with this one. It has resources for high schoolers up to postgraduate level. So there's certainly something that can get you interested. And just make sure that you have the prerequisites, right?
Oh, great.
That's the
Yes,
most
and I
important
hope
thing.
I will not pass this one like the last
Yes.
time. Thank you
Yeah,
very
no
much.
worries.
Thank you.
So for everyone, like kind of, we are running these programs every year. So Beyond Research is Beyond AI is in the research stage. So the students are working on the research projects. And for those interested in Beyond AI, applications will probably open sometimes in June, I guess. Not quite 100% sure when exactly, but like let's say May, June, something around that time, applications will open for that, and the program will start in September. And Beyond Quantum is going to start in February. Applications going to be opening in 2 weeks' time, as I've been saying, and the preparation stage, which is kind of like the first filter, that is going to be happening during January.
Thank you. One last question. QIT has been working to connect Latin American students to global quantum initiatives. From your perspective, how can programs like Thinking Beyond or UpskillAI partner with such networks to build bridges between Europe and Latin America in AI and quantum education?
Well, I think from my understanding, the biggest hurdle is the language, right? So kind of that because these programs are in English. Otherwise, I'm seeing no issues like for Latin American students joining. I mean, I have, for example, quite a few students from Peru, from Brazil, right? So there's no reason to not have Latin American students as well. So I'm not seeing any kind of hurdle besides that I know that it's a language, right? Or do
Yeah.
you see any hurdles? Do you see any particular hurdles that would prevent Latin American students from joining? I mean, you will know better than me.
No, I agree with your point. So, thank you so much for your answers to our questions, and yet we can move to the next presentation.
Thank you very much. Have
Thank
a
you.
good time, everyone.